What's up, everyone? NanMan here, and we're going to be doing another modern meta breakdown. This time, we're going to be looking at a deck that has no Modern Horizons cards in it. That's right, we're talking about Tron. Alright, so you heard it in our intro. It's pretty much the only deck in Modern that has no Modern Horizons 1 or no Modern Horizons 2 cards in it. It's kept its shell in pretty much all its entirety throughout the shifts and changes. A lot of the old school Modern deck pre-Modern Horizons have basically fallen apart, don't exist, or have had to shift and change dramatically to fit into the Modern Horizons meta that we're in. So seeing a deck still put up results, still be able to win online is cool to be able to see, because it says, hey, I've got so many cool stuff that I don't have to change. It's also the deck that is running the least amount of lands in any deck in Modern. You would think about, oh, okay, what about burn, stuff like that? Usually that's running about 20 or so lands, where the Tron list can get by with 18, 19 lands in it because of the power of the Tron lands themselves. And for those that have never played this deck, or maybe they kind of have this hatred of it and don't really care too much about it, we're going to break things down a little bit, talk to you about where the kind of idea of the deck come from, what is the kind of gameplay and strategy that you might be having to use when you're playing this deck, and how you might have to fight against this. When we kind of go through our breakdown here, you'll see above me there are some cards that are rotating through and just kind of showing, hey, these are some really key important cards of the deck. There's also other cards that we're going to talk to, because there are some different aspects of the deck that we'll break down into more details. But to get things started, let's talk about why this deck is able to run so few lands compared to anything else. And it really comes on the back of our Urza Lands, right? You can see down here Urza's Tower, Urza's Power Plant, Urza's Mine. Those are the most important ones. Now, if you have one of each onto the battlefield, then they get to tap for additional mana, right? So you can see Urza Mine is above me here. Normally it taps for one colorless, but if you have both the Mine, Power Plant, and Tower, now the Mine taps for 2, Power Plant taps for 2, and Urza's Tower taps for 3, giving you a total of 7 mana off of 3 lands, which allows you to be able to play those really expensive colorless related cards like Ugin the Spear Dragon, Karn Liberated, Wormcoil Engine, things like that you could be able to just boom, turn 3, you could be able to play it. And you know, people will talk about natural Tron on turn 3 is when you have all 3 of those lands set up. Our goal with this deck is to get those 3 lands onto the battlefield as quick as possible. We have ways to be able to do that with our artifacts. We have ways to be able to do that with our sorceries that we've got. We've also got kind of this like cycling type effects. Instead of discarding a card from your hand, you're basically playing an artifact and cycling through it to draw cards. That comes with our Chromatic Sphere and our Chromatic Star. Enter the battlefield. Cool. We tap it for a mana of any color. Basically, we're going to be generating green mana, because in this list it's basically the mono green version. There is a mono blue version of Tron. We're not going to highlight that today. We're just focusing on the mono green list because it is the most consistent version. Mono blue does have some consistency, but it's more counter, and it's a little different. Both are fun if you like this style of play. But Sphere and Star, basically you're going to play it for 1 mana, tap another mana to generate a green mana, and draw a card by sacrificing this. The green mana then allows you to be able to play into your next set of cards things like Sylvan Scrying, Ancient Stirrings, these types of effects to help us dig. Ancient Stirrings lets us look at the top 5 cards. We're looking for, of course, a colorless card. So this, in the early stages, allows us to be able to find lands. Hopefully it's one of our Urza lands. Sometimes we might be able to find a different land if we need to. Or later on in the game, we might be able to find a threat. We might be able to find Karn. We might be able to find Ulamog. We might be able to find an Oblivion Stone. These types of effects to kind of help us out. That's just sort of go through our deck a little bit quicker. We also have our Sylvan Scrying, which specifically lets us find a land card, right? Not basic, not anything like that. So we're targeting those Urza lands with this. Same thing with our Expedition Map. Both of these kind of pull double duty. Expedition Map costs 1, 2 to sacrifice, search your library for a land card, reveal it, put it into your hand. So again, 8 different cards, between scrying and expedition to allow us to search up specifically for these Urza lands. And so that's where we're hoping, is that we should have at least one of those lands. We should be able to have a way to kind of get towards that. You know, an expedition map within our first couple turns really helps speed us up. Works out really well. The kind of ability to draw cards off our artifacts is really great. We talked about Chromatic Sphere, Chromatic Star. Relic of Progenitus also does this, but also serves double duty of some graveyard hate, targeting down people's stuff. Pay one, sack it, exile all of the graveyards, and be able to draw cards. So that's kind of why it's in there in the main list. Warping Whale is that kind of protection. Exile target creature with power or toughness 1 or less. We know that there's Ragavans and, you know, annoying things that are running around with that 1 toughness, so this is very nice. We can also counter a sorcery with this, as well as make a Scion. Scion is not really what we're trying to do with it. The first 2 abilities is really what it's for. We highlighted Oblivion Stone briefly, but I'll kind of talk about it now because Oblivion Stone is our protection spell. The goal is to be able to get this out and wipe the board with it. Costs 3 to play, costs 5 to blow up. So in theory, if we have all of our lands the way we're supposed to, you could be blowing up the field on turn 4. And we know that a lot of stuff in Modern is really kind of picking up and decided around that turn 4. It's a really important stage in the Modern format. So having this to be able to wipe the board on turn 4 is really nice. You could put fate counters on things to protect your stuff from getting blown up. It doesn't happen as often. It is a thing that can happen if you're already ahead, get more ahead kind of thing. But just make a note of it, does cost 8 mana to wipe the board essentially of all non-land permanents. So that means artifacts, enchantments, creatures, planeswalkers, all of the things that might be annoying are gone. Speaking of planeswalkers, we're running 10 in our list because, you know, they're the best colorless planeswalkers that exist. The big thing is natural Tron or getting Tron and immediately throwing down our Karn Liberated. Karn Liberated. It can help protect itself by getting rid of 1 annoying thing, right? Exile target permanent. Again, we can get rid of things that are trouble, planeswalkers, creatures, artifacts, enchantments, even lands, right? You can get rid of lands with Karn. Or if you're already ahead and have some way to protect it off of one of your creatures that you might have, you can be able to do its plus ability. Target player exiles a card from his or her hand. So some disruption built into it. You know, makes Karn a little bit scary. Starts with 6 loyalty, jumps up to 10 loyalty just off the +4 ability to be able to exile a card, or drops down to 3 loyalty when you're exiling a permanent. But 7 mana, you think, wow, that's kind of scary. But when 3 of our lands make that, it's very easy to be able to play Karn Liberated. Plus, we can find it off Ancient Stirrings, just like any of the other powerful planeswalkers we have. So that's kind of our normal go-to one. We've got Karn Great Creator, which is really a toolbox planeswalker in this list. Activated abilities of artifacts your opponent control can't be activated, so that's, of course, that blanket passive ability that it's got, something that we're not going to have to worry too much about what our opponents are doing if we have it out. But really, we care about that -2 ability, which allows us to start pulling from our sideboard. Now, you can see a little bit over here, right, like above me here, that list of one-ofs that are there. Those are all artifacts that we can be able to tutor for off of Karn the Great Creator. Choose an artifact card you own from outside the game. That will include our sideboard there that we can just pull in specific situations to help us. So Karn is great in that situation. Love it, love it, love it. That's why those two have 8 copies of Karn between them. Then Ugin the Spirit Dragon is here. Board wipe potential works great, right? Exile each permanent with converted mana cost X or less. That's 1 or more colors. So if you're not fighting against Affinity or an artifact-based strategy, you can get rid of all the pesky stuff on the battlefield. Costs 8. So in theory, we could be playing this as early as turn 4. Seems like a pretty powerful way to kind of get ahead in that regard. The +2 ability of it, of course, just deals 3 damage to any target, so you can be able to shoot down pesky creatures. You can start shooting your opponents in the face. And if you are able to protect it and get up to that 10 loyalty, gain 7 life, draw 7 cards, then put 7 permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield. I did not talk about Karn Liberated's ultimate, but it basically lets you restart the game. Doesn't happen very often. Every now and again, for Tron players that have played for a while, they'll have those stories and they'll tell you, oh yes, I did get to restart the game and it was great, right? But Ugin the Spirit Dragon has been one that I have seen ultimate more than I've seen Karn Liberated be ultimated. So there is that aspect to be worried about, because the permanents that Tron players get to put on the battlefield are not ones that you want to see. So be aware of that ultimate potential there. Let's hop in, talk a little bit about the creatures that you can be able to see. You can see we got a lot of one-ofs above us too, again for that, and 2 of them are Scary Eldrazi. Now, previously they've done some fluctuations, and you might see shifts in these numbers. Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger is that big one where you might see more than 1 copy of on list. Sometimes you'll see players run 2 of. The reason for that is because of that cast ability of it. There's a trigger when you cast Ulamog. Even if it's countered, we're still getting to exile 2 target permanents that our opponent control. Well, not necessarily your opponent control, but why would you exile your own stuff? So you're targeting 2 annoying things, getting rid of them off it, and that's specifically on the cast, so it doesn't matter if it gets countered. If it sticks around and not countered, guess what? It's indestructible. It's a 10/10, and when it attacks, you exile the top 20 cards of your opponent's library. They don't go to their graveyard, they're just gone. So it's basically saying, hey, do you have a clock to be able to deal with this? You have an exile type effect to get rid of it. If you don't, I'm going to either kill you off of the damage of 10 power swinging at you, or you're essentially going to get milled out and not be able to use any of the cards that are getting milled because they're exiled. So Ulamog is a game ender. If it resolves, it's on the battlefield. It's very hard to come back from that. The other powerful Eldrazi that we're talking about is Emrakul the Promised End. Of course, this is our one that's flying, trample, protection from instants. It's a 13/13. It is reduced in cost by the card types. Of course, we are going to have likely lots of artifacts in there, lots of sorceries in our graveyard to make it a little bit less, even Planeswalkers, because things are going to die. So we should be able to cast it pretty cheaply, at least for around that 10, 9, 8, depending on how things are going. Shouldn't be too high. I feel like it'll be very rare that you're casting it for the full cost. Nice thing about it is when it enters the battlefield, gain control of target opponent during that player's next turn. After that turn, that player takes next turn. Sometimes they're not going to be able to do much, because if you have this 13/13 and they have some creatures, you can just attack in and just eat their creatures. So having that out is very, very nice. These Ulamog, the Emrakul, they're the game enders. Hey, I'm playing this. I'm closing it out at this point. Wormcoil and Thragtusk are our kind of mid-range, try to potentially stabilize, try to keep us in the game. That's their duty in this list, right? Wormcoil Engine, 6/6, Death Touch, Lifelink. If it dies, you make a 3/3 Death Touch worm, you make a 3/3 Lifelink worm. Basically splits in half, you get 2 of them. The big part of it is that Lifelink, right? Same with Thragtusk. Our job here is to keep us in the game. Things might have been going tough for us. Maybe we were not getting Tron on turn 3. Maybe it's turn 5 that we finally got Tron online. Maybe we didn't even get Tron online and we're having to be waiting until turn 6 to be able to cast this. And we just have 6 lands, right? That is very possible. And in those cases, Wormcoil is very clutch because it allows us to be able to have a blocker or an attacker that gains us life and keeps us in the game longer. Thragtusk, same kind of deal. As it enters the battlefield, you're gaining 5 life. If it dies, you make a 3/3 beast. Basically, this is a wall to keep us in the game. Those are the whole reasons Wormcoil and Thragtusk are in here. Every now and again, you might see Thragtusk in the sideboard, 2 Wormcoil's main board, or some fluctuation along those lines. But the 5/6 cost is a nice package to have 1/1. On those off chances we're not getting our natural Tron, we've been popping our expedition maps, but maybe we've only gotten 2 of our lands. Otherwise, we're sitting here with some forests. Maybe we have multiple copies of Mine, maybe we have multiple copies of Power Plant, maybe multiple copies of Towers, but don't have each individual one. So those are our kind of keep us alive, keep us in it. And then, of course, everybody knows how Walking Ballista works, right? We're going to start shooting things. Pew, 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 pew. We have all this mana. Let's dump it into a Walking Ballista, right? Oh, I have on turn 4, I could have 8 mana or 9 mana, depending on what it is. It's 10 mana, right? 2 towers, a mine, and a power plant. So it could be a 5/5, 4/4. It's very scary and very easy to just be able to make this into a threat to just start shooting things or your opponent with it. So having a one of, I've seen a lot of Walking Ballistas in the sideboard. There's an extra copy in the sideboard that we can pull from Karn the Great Creator. So kind of that versatility creature that's in here to help us out. Or early on, you could play it for 2 for 1, right? Depending on how it is, just shoot one thing, act as a blocker, be kind of a deterrent. But the Walking Ballista serves double duty of delay or, a threat. Real quick, I'm just going to highlight a few things from the sideboard to kind of wrap things up here, since we have been kind of going through a little bit more details about what the deck is trying to do, because even though it is seeming very, very straightforward of a deck, there are some nuances on how you have to play this type of list. So cool things about it, right? We have some hate cards that are in our sideboard, things like Chalice of the Void to be able to counter things, Trinisphere to make things cost 3 mana. We've got some protection off Ensnaring Bridge. Liquid Metal Coating is a really cool one because it turns something into an artifact, and we know Karn Great Creator shuts down artifacts from being able to activate their activated abilities. So, Liquid Metal Coating allows you to turn a permanent into an artifact. Could be a land, could be a planeswalker, could be a creature, annoying things, kind of that sort of double duty. Pithing Needle, again, activated abilities we hate. Tormod's Crypt is in here, anti-graveyard stuff. Same thing with like Force of Vigor, anti-graveyard stuff. One other thing to note, there is a Sundering Titan in this list because so many lists are running 3, 4, 5 colors. So blowing up as many lands as possible seems great, and Sundering Titan allows us to do that. Costs 8 mana. Used to be we wouldn't really see Sundering Titan except for on like the mono blue Tron list, but now we're seeing it because of how many players are running 3, 4, or 5 colors. That just being like, okay, Sundering Titan sideboard, bring it in. Let's blow up some lands and have some fun. Tron is a hated deck sometimes from a lot of players because it is natural Tron. Here's a 7 cost thing like Karn, right? Something scary on turn 3, turn 4. And so a lot of people used to not like it. It's a kind of middle of the road deck, right? It can do well against certain decks, and there's plenty of decks that it kind of struggles against. Those faster combo-y decks tend to do pretty well against it. Mid-range and that sort of stuff tends to kind of get eaten by it. So, it's always been in the Modern meta and still exists. I thought it was great to be able to highlight it because there's no Modern Horizon cards in there. And it's kind of a testament to the staying power of Tron and the deck itself, that it can just stick around throughout all the shifts and the changes and just keep itself consistent, kind of how the deck works. But let me know what you guys think. Do you like Tron decks? Have you played against them recently? Do you hate playing against them? Where are you on that side of the coin on how you fight and play against Tron? But if you guys like this content, make sure you're hitting the subscribe, the follow stuff. We've, of course, got our streaming stuff over on twitch.tv/TheRealNanMan. But that's going to do it for us here. Thanks so much for tuning in and watching, and I'll see you guys next game.